Good morning, everybody. Glad to be back here in the studio 2019 on this early Saturday morning. My name again is Ed Samuel. I'm a career coach with a firm called Sam Manova. We are based in Kennett Square and serve clients in the greater Philadelphia region and across the U.S. This morning we're going to talk about a question that I want you to ask yourself. Am I underemployed? Now, one way to start off is by asking yourself the opposite question. Am I fully employed? And I'm going to give it, this question, my own spin. What does it really mean to be fully employed? And here's 6 things that I want you to ask yourself. So number 1, are you using all your skills, experience, talent that you have in the work that you do? That's one question I'd love to have you ask. Now, the second one is, are you growing in your job? Whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, but are you learning something new? And are you acquiring new soft skills? Or are you acquiring new technical skills? But the whole point here, are you growing in the job? So here's number 3. Do you have a boss, a manager, or team leader? Is that person smart? Are they sharp? Do they really care about you? Is it genuine, and not staged? Are they supporting you? Are they encouraging you? Are they developing you? Do they want to see you grow? Are they providing you feedback when you do something good and constructive feedback when you need it? Do they care about work-life balance? And do they have any form of fun streak in their life that they bring to you? Number 4, what about the company culture? Is it stimulating? Is it a safe environment? Do you get a sense of team? Again, is it organized? Are you leading edge? If those things are happening around you. When the senior people, whether it be the business owners, the executives, when you see them, do they seem to treat you no different than a board member? When they talk to the receptionist, do they stop and do they talk to them or do they just go storming right by? That culture becomes really important. And do they promote the culture? And do they meet and talk about the culture and how important it is in terms of the environment that everyone works in? Number 5, this is one everybody wants to, hopes and prays that is working well. But are you getting paid competitively, not just at your company, but within your industry and the region where you work? It's a beautiful thing when that happens. Number 6, there's no glass ceiling where you work, whether it's a small company, medium, large firm. In other words, you're in a position where you can continue to grow, get promoted, or grow broadly or grow upward, but there's no bias. There's no infamous glass ceiling. You just can continue to grow, and people want that to happen. Now, I would argue these are 6 things that if you ask yourself, yep, Ed, every one of those are in play, I can look at you and say, you sounds like you are fully employed. Now, and everybody, shoots for that. Everybody shoots for being fully employed. And maybe we don't get all 6, but maybe we get 5 of the 6. Maybe we get 4 of the 6. Maybe we get 3 of the 6. Now, what would happen if you were underemployed? Let's go back through the same sets of questions. What happens if you weren't using all your skills, your experience? What happens if you were born to talk to people, yet you're in a role, in a job, in a company where you're being put into a cubicle and you don't talk to anybody? And those skills being really restricted simply because of where you're at. Do you find yourself going into work daily, weekly, monthly, month after month after month, and there is no training? You're not learning anything new, not from a technology standpoint or from building your soft skills. Maybe there's no training at all. Hey, maybe they hire you and you're working and that's as good as we'll ever get. And anything that you do is going to be on your own after hours. Now, what happens if you have a boss that's completely opposite of what I said earlier? A tyrant, a person who comes in, slams their fists on every single team meeting, a person who has no hesitation of using 4-letter words in meetings, a person who raises their voice, who has to shout. Hey, how about a person who really doesn't care whether your kids have a birthday party tonight? Couldn't care less. What about people who don't, who never give you positive feedback? The only thing they do is give you negative feedback. What about a person who's micromanaging? coming in every day saying, what did you do yesterday? Tell me exactly what you did. Is that what's going on? Is that happening? What about the company culture? Is when you walk through the door, do you feel a sense of somebody's, we're all in this together? Or it's, oh my goodness, another day here. Is this cutthroat? Are leaders in this company pitting people against each other for their own benefit, even to the point to see people quit, but that they will get financially rewarded? And there are companies like that. Is that the kind of culture you work in? And is something like, having a vision, talking about what the future looks like? Do you have those executives walking right past the receptionist? Does it feel like when you talk to an executive, somehow they're acting bigger and better than you? Now let's talk about pay. What happens if you're not getting paid competitively? What happens if, maybe even in the company, there's 3 people here. Everyone's getting paid, you think, similarly, but on a market basis in where you live, the company is underpaying all 3 of you poorly because they're not current. Are you getting paid competitively? And then lastly, there is a glass ceiling. There's a point where, your boss just got hired and he or she's not going anywhere soon, and they'd love to see you just stay right where you're at for as long as you could possibly sit there. And they're not too interested about you growing, because if you grow, you might outgrow the position, the company, and the boss. So the question that I ask is that, are any of those things true for you? And if they are, you might very well be underemployed. Now, you say, what can we do in some of these areas? So let's talk about the one thing that everybody would want to hit first, which is, am I being underpaid for what I'm doing? Now, so we'll take a look at salary first. If you're working anywhere, how do you know if you're getting underpaid? Whether it be your base salary, whether it be a bonus, maybe you're in sales, it's 100% commission. You got to ask yourself, am I being paid fairly? That's a great question to ask yourself if you truly care whether you're fully employed or not. Now, many companies, depending on the size or organizations, they have salary bands where there's a minimum, a maximum, and a midpoint. And generally speaking, the way it works is that if you have very little experience, you're going to be near the minimum. And if you have a ton of experience, and let's say a minimum, less than a year, a ton of experience would be more than 15 years. Then you should be towards the top end of your range position. And if you've been at it for 5 years, maybe you're in the mid. But it's not that much more complicated than just trying to understand that and where you fit. Now, there's several things you can do to try to figure this out and to try to at least understand, where's the minimum, the mid, the max. Depending on the relationship you have with the person you work for, you can ask your boss, hey, what's the range position here? Some bosses will just tell you, and you'll get the sense of sincerity. Sometimes you can go to HR, and human resources will sit down and kind of explain the range positions, and this is where you're at. But sometimes they won't. And you got to ask yourself, when they say, no, we can't really share that with you, why do you think that is? It's not really, nuclear secrets here we're talking about, but you always have to ask yourself the question, when they don't share it with you, you're kind of kept in the dark. So they have kind of like maybe a little bit more of the power, maybe a bit more of the knowledge. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, they're not sharing it with me. So maybe it's time for you to go, do your own digging. Now, there are some exceptions. If you work for big companies and you're a senior executive listening to this program, then you know that if you're publicly traded at a certain level, salaries have to be disclosed to the senior people of the company. So that's by law. But for a lot of us in the companies, whether we work in retail, whether we work at an organization, a nonprofit, wherever we work, typically there are those salary bands, and many times people's salaries aren't publicly discussed, not by the person you work next to, and it's something that people just don't talk about. And then you're kind of like in a situation where you're just not sure. So let me talk to you about some things that you can do on your own. So if you work, let's say, in the state of, Pennsylvania, you worked in the Philadelphia region, and let's say you were a marketing manager and you worked for a company that was $100 million size company, you could kind of start doing some digging on your own. So I'm going to give you some places where you can go to start to understand salary from a competitive standpoint. So one place you could go is something called ONET. O-capital-N-E-T, ONET. ONET's a great tool. Everybody can access it, but what it does is it gives you could type in a job title or a career, and it can actually give you a list of 20 plus subtypes of job descriptions or job titles. And if you clicked on one specifically, and let's say it was marketing manager, what would happen is that you would get a feel for, okay, here are the requirements to be a marketing manager. Here are the people that have degrees. Here are the people that don't have degrees. And this is what the state of Pennsylvania pays for that particular job as a rule in terms of an average salary. You could also click a button and it'll tell you what any other state is paying for that same job, as well as what the national average is. It's also going to tell you in that job that you have whether in the next 10 years that job is going down in terms of demand, staying flat, or increasing. These are all indicators, but it's giving you a salary and it's giving you some information. So that's one tool that you can easily access. The other tool that's out there is called salary.com. I use that tool a lot. I use two primary tools, quite honestly, salary.com, and I also use something called payscale.com. Both those tools are really neat tools. They give you baseline information, and then if you want the full report, you do have to pay a little bit of money to get it. I'm going to give you some examples of here where how that's paid off for people I've worked with just last year alone on several cases. You can go to Glassdoor. But again, I'm always worried about Glassdoor because I think it can be slanted, especially for employees that were asked to leave a company. But again, it's a data point. And certainly you could talk to former employees, people that used to work there, or people that you know on a personal level. You can certainly ask the question. They could always say no, or they don't want to share it with you. But anytime you can get a salary data point, it will be good. But the reason you're looking at ONET or salary.com and PayScale, salary.com and PayScale could actually allows you to kind of scale not just Philadelphia, but the size of the company, the number of employees, because your salary might be very different if you're in a small company with just a few people versus a very large company with a lot of people. The marketing demand in either could be very, very different. So the size of a company will matter when you're taking a look and doing an analysis like this for yourself. And again, you're doing this, not HR. You're just trying to make sure you're being paid competitively and fair. Now, one other place you can look, and it's fairly recent, but if you're on LinkedIn and you're applying for a job, LinkedIn, for many positions, are starting to post the salary range for that type of role, probably pulling some of the data from the same places we're talking about. And every so often, you'll see a job actually posted, and you'll certainly see it in the government sector because it's required what the salary is for that particular position. In the private sector, every once in a while you have a feel for they'll actually post what the position pays roughly. But these are all things that you're trying to do some research on to simply ask to answer the very question, am I being paid competitively and fair for the type of role that I have, for the type of job I have, for the type of company I'm in, for the location I'm based in? And you'll come up with an answer. And if that answer is, seems like you're in the ballpark, then that's a great thing. Something else you could do is you could talk to a career coach. A career coach is a great person to go talk to, saying, hey, I want to find out if I'm underemployed. And a career coach, a good one, will be able to walk you through everything we're talking about, and we'll start to figure out, everything from, that needs to be looked at, especially on a salary standpoint. Now, some career coaches will have access to 1,000 jobs across the country, and they'll even know the pay range those jobs are being posted for, whether there's a bonus included or not. So they can give you kind of almost like an insider's look at what companies are paying for the types of positions that you might be holding, again, to give you a data point. Now, I want to talk about some examples to try to drive some of this home. And these are real life examples. Earlier last year, I got a phone call from a person and said, hey, Ed, I'm in a small firm. I'm the office manager. And I've been here for 10 years, but it doesn't feel like I'm being, paid maybe what I should be paid. I don't even know that. So what I did is I worked with them and I walked through, their job responsibilities. I walked through the size of the company. And then we went and we accessed some of these very tools that we're talking about. Salary.com, ONET, PayScale. And we actually figured out, by just looking at it from a competitive standpoint, an office manager with 10 plus years of experience doing that type of work, this person needed to be above the midpoint. And sure enough, what was happening? He was being paid below the midpoint. Now, the reason we were doing the research is because his thought was he wants to go talk to his boss. But instead of going to his boss and saying, hey, I haven't had a raise, his thinking was, let me go into boss, let me provide the boss with some data, because this is a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. This is just, hey, this is what the market is paying. And he actually had that conversation, and it resulted in a pretty decent increase in his salary because of the way he approached it, how he spoke to his boss. His boss actually took the data and went and was like surprised. You did some research. You helped me out, because he certainly wasn't about ready to do it. And then he came back a couple of weeks later, and the person ended up with an increase that would never have happened. And now he went from being underemployed to fully employed because he's being paid competitively and correctly. And he had no intention of wanting to leave the company. It was just that he was using the data that's out there to help answer that question when it came to salary. Now, a few years back, here's something that happens a lot, and people don't realize it. People graduate from university, let's say they're engineers. In this case, they were engineers. And what happens that when people are getting ready to graduate, employers from all over, they come to the school and they say, hey, we like you. They do a very quick interview. And they say, hey, we want to make you an offer. Everything looks good. And next thing you know, they're off and running. An engineer, and they get paid, let's just say $42,000 a year to start. And that sounds great. Another engineer, their parents decide to hire a career coach for their, in this particular case, their son, and says, hey, we're not going to say yes to everybody that's coming to the college. What we're going to do is we're going to figure out what's out there, what would you like to do, and what can we leverage. So 2 months later, same engineer, same GPA, lands a job making $60,000 a year. Now, you're off and running. Now, the person who graduated, who's the engineer who's making $38,000 or $41,000 versus the person down the street in another company making $60,000, there lies how people begin their careers underemployed. Because that particular company took full advantage of you being new to the industry, but yet competitively in terms of how smart they were and the impact they were going to have, another company down the street was more than happy to pay $60,000 for the same skill set. And then people start off in their careers, and 5 years from now, the person who's making 60 is now making 75, and the person who's making 42 might be making 48, but they're technically underemployed because of how they approach the job market. That happens. I'll give you another example. Another example is a person called me last fall and said, hey, Ed, can I just chat with you? And he kind of talked to me about his story. And after about 3-4 minutes on the phone, looking at his resume, looking at his degrees, looking at everything about him, he's working in a bank in Delaware, clearly about $20,000 underpaid. But yet, and he's still there simply because he never really took the time to think about what else could he do. And what ended up happening in his case is that this particular bank hired him right out of school, paid him about the most minimum you could possibly imagine. And he's been getting 2% increases every year. And now he's at a point where he's at least minimum $20,000 underpaid. And there is a way out, but he was, very nervous in terms of how to work with a career coach and how to get out of this situation that he's in. And again, no fault of people starting their careers, but you got to be so careful that you don't start in the hole, because then you're underemployed before you even know it. And 5, 10 years later, you're really underemployed. So that's a message to people coming out of school who are seniors in college, parents who have seniors in college. Get a career coach involved to help them get the very most of who they are coming right out of school. And, you have other examples, people that I talked to, I got hired into a company. I left my company, went to this new company because I thought I was underemployed. And I was promised, hey, the base salary was just a little bit more than what I was making. And I was promised a bonus at the end of the year. Well, 5 years later, no increase, no base salary increase, and no bonuses after 5 years. And I get the phone call, Ed, I think I'm underemployed because promises were not kept. These are just some examples of what happens when they're underemployed and some of the reasons for it. Okay, let's focus on a wrap up here. And again, I want you to go back, and I'm creating kind of a new definition of what underemployed means. And the way to test it again is, ask yourself, are you fully employed? And remember those 6 things that I talked about earlier. Are you using all your skills and experiences to the best of your ability? Those innate skills in terms of who you are, your personality. Are you growing in that job that you're in today? Is your boss somebody who's supporting you in that growth in your career and somebody generally who wants to see you do well? And are they helping you with that life balance? Are they throwing in some fun? Are they a good person really in your life? Is the company culture stimulating? Something that says, hey, I can't wait to get into the office. Are you getting paid competitively? Not just at your company, but within your industry, the region where you work. And then lastly, is there a ceiling? Are you working real hard? But no matter what you do, no matter, when you start to look into the future within 3 months, 6 months, a year, is there some ceiling where, no matter what you do, you're going to be stuck? Just ask yourself those questions. Am I fully employed? Because if you're not, then either a part of you or all of you could be very underemployed. Now, use the tools that I shared with you today, especially on the salary side. onetsalary.com. You have the ability to look at that information, and now you start to become knowledgeable in terms of where you might be for the work that you do, and then you have to decide on what action to take. If you're not sure, call a career coach. Call me up. I'm happy to do a free consultation, have an initial discussion, to have this discussion about whether you're fully employed or whether you're underemployed. So we're just about out of time. I'd like you to join us for our next Optimize Your Career program on Saturday, February 2nd. We're going to focus on the importance of volunteering and why that activity should be put on your resume, contrary to what many people think, and how leaders view volunteering work that you do, in a positive light. So I can't wait to talk to you about that. This again is Ed Samuel. I'm a career coach with Sam Nova. Our website is www.samnovainc.com. If you'd like to reach me with a question or comment, email me at esamuel@samnovainc.com or call our main number at 610-274-8214. Make it a great weekend. So long for now, and God bless.